Our final honorable mention on the Locked On Senators 2023 NHL Draft Rankings is Matteo Mann. Of course, it's Matteo Mann out of Chicoutimi from the Quebec League. And if that name sounds familiar, Pilsy, well, it should for Ottawa Senators fans.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be a Locked On Senators draft profile without getting someone attached to the Ottawa Senators. And Matteo Mann, son of assistant GM Trent Mann and Troy Mann, for the former Belleville Sens coach, is his uncle. So there certainly is some strings attached to Matteo Mann and the Ottawa Senators.
So I got to meet Troy Mann last year. I've also met Trent Mann, who's a big human being.
Yeah.
His son did not skip very many meals growing up. Matteo Mann is listed at 6'5", 225 pounds. I want to say out of all the 55 plus prospects we've done, there's nobody over 225.
No, definitely not. And Ross, I would even think 6'5" might be cutting him short a little. Like, he looks like 6'6", maybe even 6'7" out there on skates. Like, it's absolutely insane how big this kid is. Like, if you're watching a highlight of him playing, there's no difficulty figuring out which player is Matteo Mann. Let me just put it that way.
He's also not afraid to use his size. He's physical, he's mean, and he's a player that coming into the season, elite prospects actually had high hopes for. I know if you're watching on YouTube, you just saw a lot of the not ranked, and that's in about a top 100. Now, there are certain outlets that do have him ranked. The Hockey News has him ranked 79th. Daily Faceoff has him ranked 95th. McKean's Hockey has him ranked 160th. And by NHL Central Scouting, he's the 84th ranked North American skater. So do with that information what you may. This, though, by all accounts, I'm sure Mateo would tell you the same thing, was a very tough year for him, battling early season injuries and just playing on a bad team.
Yeah, it was unfortunate he got started the year off with an injury, Ross. He missed a couple weeks right off the top, so that's never good. He's in his third season in the queue, and he had 45 games played, no goals, 5 assists. And the thing is, when you're looking at Matteo Mann, you're not necessarily looking at the points, the goals, the assists, but what I liked from his highlights and the queue, I'm finding they put out decent highlights of their players. This time it was a Matteo Mann highlight with like a heavy rock background music, which was pretty appropriate because most of his highlights were him finishing checks, and you could just see the other smaller skilled queue players kind of cowering as they touch the puck and they see him. They're like, I'm about to get crushed.
Yes, they are. They're showing off all their nice jerseys over in the Q Pills.
Yeah, I love all the jerseys. Yes,
well,
everyone knows that.
With Matteo Mann, like, what's really unfortunate for him is last year he had a better season than this year.
Mm-hmm.
As a 16-year-old in the queue, right? Playing against that level of competition. He even had a cup of coffee the year before in one of the COVID seasons. So this is a player where I think a team's going to really like him. I really do. I'm convinced. Now, and there's a really good story written on NHL.com kind of about the dynamic between Trent Mann and his son, Mateo. Great East Coast family, right? Yep. Salt of the earth. So we still have to get Trent Mann on this show.
Absolutely.
It needs to happen this summer. But when you look at what Matteo Mann is able to accomplish when he's at his best, physical shutdown defenseman. Okay. It's just a matter of getting him there, and it's going to be a long project. I see him as a guy who's going to go later on in the draft, but it could be a blessing in disguise that he had that down year. If it is a blip on the radar, I think he needs to work on his skating a little bit to keep up, but the decision-making for me was good from what I saw. So I think it could being a blessing in disguise with no pressure. He's just going to go into an organization and be a 6th round pick, 5th round pick, kind of a flyer on him. And if he goes out there and has a good draft plus 1 year, all will be forgotten and he'll be looked at, I think, in a good light. Now, the article I read on NHL.com was saying he interviewed with 8 different teams at the NHL Combine.
Okay.
And when he interviewed with the Ottawa Senators, who of course had to interview him.
Shocking.
Trent Mann said, no, I'm not here for this. Left the room.
Yeah, I think that's the right approach because the thing is, I think parents that are in the sports world, whether it's former athletes or parents that work for teams, the last thing they want is for an impression to be put on their kid, like, wow, you're only getting this chance because of your dad, like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's not, you just don't want to be a part of that. You want it to be a separate thing, much like Jorian Donovan, Ross. The Ottawa Senators said, look, we like this kid for so many reasons. It just happens to be a fact that he's the son of a guy working for a team and a former Senator, right? So I think that's the approach you want to take there. Now, the Ottawa Senators, Ross, now we're actually in Senators territory here. They have a 4th round pick, a 5th round pick, and 3 7th round picks. I'm not sure I'm comfortable that them taking Matteo Mann with the 4th or the 5th, unfortunately. They do have 3 7th, though, as I mentioned. If he's still around and they want to take him in the 7th round and have Trent Mann walk up to the stage and announce it, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, as long as he doesn't threaten to resign if they don't make the pick, right? Like he did with Shane Pinto a few years ago, said you're not trading that pick. We need Shane Pinto. But I agree. I think if he is available in the 7th round, there is upside. I was actually surprised that Elite Prospects made note in their draft guide. Like he was the guy they had high hopes for this year. Kind of seems like the profile, 6'5", big, maybe not the fastest player.
Not a good skater. Yeah, that's not EP's mark usually.
Right. So for them to see something in him, obviously it didn't materialize, and they were he was left off their 116 player rankings. But I don't know why I'm getting this little feeling that he could be a guy that makes sense and could have a decent pro career. He is a left shot though, and Ottawa drafted 4 left shot defensemen last year.
Yeah,
I'm kind of hoping they draft a different position.
Are you sure he's a left shot, Ross? I got him as a right shot here.
Oh, sorry about that. No, I missed that up. My bad. I'm talking about a guy from yesterday. So he's a right shot defenseman. Very coveted position. Let's get him in the system.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, the thing is, Ross, look, saying he's not a very good skater, that's being generous. He has a lot of work to do in the skating category. But I mean, a big kid like him, that's going to happen. But to not harp on the negatives, to throw a positive spin on this, Ross, is he finds ways to work around that. And when you're 6'5" and you have the range that he does, I noticed there's guys coming in attacking him, and a guy sees that he's a little slower skating backwards, and they're like, oh, sweet, I'll just blast right by this guy. He has such long range that to get by him, you need like 5 feet. He has like a 5-foot radius that you're just not getting by him. He's going to poke his stick out with his long arm, his long stick, and he just sends guys wide, and eventually they just run out of real estate till they have to go to the corner or keep going around the back of the net. So he is able to make up for not being the best skater. And I thought he did a really good job getting in shooting lanes, putting that big body in front of heavy shots from the point and blocking shots. And like I mentioned, pretty much every highlight I saw of him, he goes out of his way to finish every check. Like sometimes it's like, okay, the play's already happened. He's like, nope, I'm still finishing this check. And as a big player, that's hopefully going to be a bottom pair, right shot, shut down D. That's the mentality you got to have. Keep guys wide, block shots, and finish your checks. So he's on the right path.
So funny. And you can kind of tell it's probably a bit of a family trait in the way that Trent Mann loves drafting as well. The big physical players, right shot defenseman, Matteo Mann. And I wanted to note this because Chicoutimi had a really tough year last year, and Matteo Mann obviously kind of felt the brunt of that. But the way that the QMJHL works, especially with trades and draft picks moving around, Chicoutimi drafted 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 8th in the draft.
Whew, okay, so we got some reinforcements coming up here.
Reinforcements are coming. How about that? 4 of the top 8 picks in the draft went to Chicoutimi this past year. So hopefully the turnaround there is quick. And by that time, Matteo Mann can really establish himself as one of the biggest parts of the rebuild in Chicoutimi, and then come into the pro game. It's going to be a long road. I think maybe 4, 5, 6 years. But man, when you have that size, when you have the snarl that you do, you can round out your game with coachable aspects. And then, hey, you could potentially have a great NHL career as a mid to late round pick. That's our expectation for Matteo Mann, son of Sens assistant general manager Trent Mann, the chief of amateur scouting for a long time for the Senators. So Matteo Mann's grown up around the game, and we'll see how he can do taking the next step as an NHL draft pick. For more Locked On Senators, check us out on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.